His stagecoach rolled into Dust Creek under a dry sky. Wind pushed dust against the woman's skirt as she stepped down. Her plain dress carried stains from the road. She held a folded shawl close to her chest. "Is this the place?" she whispered, though no one answered. Townsfolk lingered by storefronts and eyed her. A ranch hand leaned against the hitch rail and smirked. "She looked starved," someone muttered near the saloon. Laughter followed, thin as wind blowing across tin roofs. She lowered her gaze and moved toward the big house her late husband's family owned. "You're late," her sister-in-law snapped at the door. "Get inside. The guests are already waiting." The woman nodded and tucked the shawl under her arm. Lanterns glowed across polished floors as she entered the dining hall. "Serve tea. Try not to spill it," the sister-in-law hissed. The woman lifted a tray with trembling hands. "Excuse me," she murmured while passing cups. A man chuckled to his wife. "She can barely stand straight." The wife whispered, "Who would bring that here?" The woman's throat tightened. Her hands trembled harder than before, making the porcelain clink. "Mind yourself," someone said. The tray tipped, tea splashed, and laughter burst. Her face burned. She set the tray down and backed away. Forgive me," she whispered before turning toward the door. Her in-laws stared coldly, but said nothing. She stepped outside where a weak breeze brushed her cheeks. One tear streaked down her face, then another, darkening the dust below. People inside laughed again. A cowboy near the corral paused in his work and looked over. He leaned on the fence, silent. His coat and hat were dusty from chores. He did not laugh or judge. He simply watched her. She clutched her shawl and wiped her cheeks. "I am fine," she whispered to no one. The cowboy spoke, his voice soft across the distance. "Rough crowd in there." She stiffened. They do not mean harm," she whispered, though her voice cracked. "They meant it," he answered plainly. He returned to brushing the horse's coat. She stepped closer, drawn by the calm in his tone. "Do you work here?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Close enough. They hire me for cattle drives." His horse snorted and nudged his arm. "You look shaken." She held her shawl tighter. "I should not cry." The cowboy shrugged. "Most folks should more often." A door slammed behind her as her sister-in-law stepped out. "There you are," the woman barked. "Get back inside and stop making scenes." The cowboy's eyes darkened, but he said nothing. The woman bowed her head. "Yes," she answered, then walked past her relative. "She's useless," someone whispered from inside. The cowboy heard every sharp word. Back inside, she resumed pouring tea. "Smile," her brother-in-law ordered through clenched teeth. She forced a weak smile that faded when another guest whispered, "Poor thing. No grace at all." Her fingers slipped against the teapot handle. "Please," she whispered, "let me try again." The crowd chuckled. The cowboy stepped through the doorway, hat in hand. "Looking for the foreman," he announced. The room went quiet for a moment before conversation resumed. People barely noticed him, the way they barely noticed her. He glanced at her once, then walked out. Later, when the guests finished eating, she gathered empty cups. "Did you see her hands shake?" a woman asked loudly. "She is a disgrace," another said. The words cut like a blade, but she carried the tray without meeting their eyes. When the last cup was emptied, she excused herself and slipped outside again. The sky had dimmed. Lantern light spilled across the yard. The cowboy leaned against the corral rail once more. "You look tired," he said. "I am," she whispered. "I thought Dust Creek would be kinder." He shook his head. "Kindness is rare in crowds. Easier to look strong when someone else is small." She breathed slowly. "Do you think they will ever see me?" He gave a slow shrug. "If someone looks long enough." She studied the dirt under her boots. "I hope so." Her shawl fluttered in the wind. He adjusted his hat. "Wind's picking up. Storm or silence depends how the night ends." They stood in quiet for a long moment. Inside, laughter swelled again. She flinched at the sound. "They do not even notice I left," she whispered. "Maybe they don't know how," he replied. "Some folks don't see what hurts right in front of them." She looked toward the corral lantern, its small flame flickering. Do you think this place will ever feel like mine? He met her eyes with steady calm. Only if you stop asking permission and take space instead. She swallowed hard. I am not brave. He answered softly. Maybe bravery starts when someone reaches their limit. Her voice trembled. I do not know if anyone sees me. The cowboy watched her, then nodded toward the house. I see someone worth more than those folks in there realize. Her breath caught. The cowboy returned to the horse. Don't let them write your story, he said as he walked away. She held her shawl close, alone again. Laughter echoed through the open windows. She wondered if anyone in Dust Creek would ever see her as a human being. The days that followed felt long and cold. She rose before dawn to cook biscuits and fetch water from the pump. Her sister-in-law walked past her with a lifted chin. Faster, the woman ordered. Breakfast should be ready before we come down. She nodded, stirring eggs over the stove flame. Her brother-in-law entered the kitchen and sniffed. Burning again. Useless hands. She kept her eyes on the pan. I will do better, she answered softly. He scoffed and walked out. After cleaning the dishes, she scrubbed steps, swept floors, and washed linens. Stop dragging that rag, her sister-in-law barked. Work like you owe this house. She whispered, yes, and resumed scrubbing. Later, she walked through town with a small basket for supplies. 2 women at the market looked at her dress and snickered. She married into the wrong house, one said loudly. They'll chase her out when they tire of the mess. She tightened her grip on her basket but kept quiet. At the fruit stall, she reached for apples. A woman shoved past. Move, she snapped. The force made her basket slip, spilling bruised fruit onto the dust. Silly thing, someone muttered. She knelt and gathered the fruit, brushing dirt from each piece. Her hands shook more with every whispered laugh. She lifted her head to breathe and caught sight of the quiet cowboy across the street. He leaned against a post near the blacksmith, arms folded. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod. Simple, gentle. She looked away, cheeks burning. Her heart stuttered at even that scrap of kindness. She rose, cradling the bruised apples, and hurried home. Back at the house, her sister-in-law inspected the supplies. Bruised, she complained. Have you no sense? The woman swallowed. They were the only ones left. The sister-in-law waved her off. Excuses. Put them away. The afternoon passed with chores. Dust coated her skirt. Her fingers reddened from scrubbing. When she paused outside to stretch, the sheriff rode past on his sorrel horse. She stepped forward timidly. Sheriff, could you tell me? He cut her off. Busy, he barked and rode on. She lowered her hand and turned back to the house. At supper, she served plates then stood in the corner. Sit, her brother-in-law said, though not kindly. She took an empty stool. Her sister-in-law sniffed. Try not to look so lost. She nodded, silent. After dishes were cleared, her brother-in-law spoke. The guest room is for respectable company. You'll sleep in the shed out back. She stared at him. The shed? He huffed. You expected a pillow? Be grateful you're here at all. The sister-in-law crossed her arms. You are not fit for a proper room. The words echoed in her skull. She dipped her gaze. As you wish. She walked outside into the cooling dusk. Wind brushed tall grass. The shed door creaked when she opened it. Inside, moonlight spilled through broken boards. A pile of rags lay in the corner. She sat, wrapping her shawl tight, letting her body shake where no one could see. She thought of her mother's voice. You are worth more than the world tells you. She almost heard it again, soft and warm. Her throat tightened. I am trying, she whispered to the dark. Outside, crickets chirped under the big western sky. Her tears came without permission. They pattered against dusty boards. She pressed her face into the shawl to quiet the sound. I do not belong here, she shivered. Wind rattled loose shingles. Something scratched the wall. Leaves scattered across the yard. She lay down, closing her eyes against loneliness. Time blurred, and she drifted toward uneasy sleep. A distant hoofbeat stirred her awake. Her eyes opened wide. Another hoofbeat, closer this time. She sat up. Lantern light from the house flickered, but no one came out. Hooves slowed outside the shed. She held her breath. Wind scraped the boards. A saddle creaked. She feared trouble, a stranger, a thief, a drunk ranch hand. She curled tighter in the shawl. Then a calm voice broke the night. "You awake in there?" Her heart leapt at the sound, the cowboy. She swallowed, voice trembling. "Yes." He shifted in the saddle. "Saw them send you out here. Figured you might need this." Something dropped near the door. A burlap sack, blanket, and a bit of jerky. She blinked toward the crack between boards. "Why?" The cowboy took a breath. "Shed's no place for anyone. Least not someone who looks so worn through." She wiped her cheek. "I do not want to be trouble." He let out a faint chuckle. "Kindness ain't trouble." Silence stretched. "Sleep easier," he said. His horse snorted. She hesitated. "Did you come just to give me that?" He shifted reins. "Mostly. And to make sure the shed door latched. Wind tears it loose." She stood and lifted the latch. "It holds now." He nodded. "Good." She brushed tears from her jaw. "You are the only person who speaks to me kindly." The cowboy paused long enough for her pulse to thrum. "Maybe they don't know how," he murmured. "Good night." With a gentle heel, he turned his horse. She listened to hoofbeats fade. She took the sack inside and unrolled the blanket. It smelled of hay and horses. Warmth wrapped around her as she lay again. Outside, the wind still rattled the boards, but she heard something else too. Hope, faint like distant hoofbeats. She lifted her shawl and whispered to the darkness, "Maybe someone sees me." The shed shuddered in the wind, and her heart waited, listening for the night to answer. If the sun had just crested the dry horizon when the stagecoach of the town merchant rattled past. She was already outside, broom in hand, scraping the mud from the steps. Her hair hung in tangled strands, and her fingers were red from the chill. Each sweep left a thin line of dirt on her apron. "Morning," a voice called, quiet but clear. She turned and saw the cowboy, crate balanced on his shoulder, dust clinging to his coat. He paused, setting it down with a soft thump. "You okay?" His eyes were steady, patient. She could not answer. Her throat tightened. I'm fine," she whispered, though it was more hope than truth. He nodded once, silently watching her. "That mud doesn't look like it wants to leave." His voice held no judgment, only calm observation. She looked down, sweeping faster. The crate sat at the edge of the porch. He straightened and tipped his hat, then moved on down the road, leaving her hands trembling. Later, she lifted her basket at the market. The bottom had weakened, and when she adjusted her grip, it split open. Apples tumbled across the dirt, rolling toward the hoof prints of passing horses. "No," she gasped, lunging to catch them. A few townspeople stopped, eyes widening. Laughter echoed faintly from a group leaning against the general store. The cowboy appeared almost without sound. He knelt beside the scattered fruit, hands steady. "Let me help," he said simply. She froze, then bent to gather apples beside him. His hands were quick, careful. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. He nodded once, eyes still calm, and lifted the crate slightly to replace the apples. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, astonished that he would bother with her. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. He shrugged. "Some things are worth a minute. You'll learn soon enough." His words were gentle, quiet, yet steady. She looked up, a flicker of warmth in her chest. For a brief moment, the dirt and dust seemed lighter. His presence, simple and unassuming, made her feel, for the first time, as if she mattered. When he left, she lingered for a moment, holding the basket, listening to the soft clop of his horse fading along the road. She felt a strange mix of gratitude and confusion. The small kindness had stirred something in her chest, a spark she did not expect. She brushed her hands against her apron, dirt smearing against the fabric, and a small smile tugged at her lips. Then reality returned. Her in-laws appeared at the gate, arms crossed. "What were you doing?" her sister-in-law demanded. "Trying to draw attention to yourself again?" The brother-in-law followed, voice sharp. "We don't need people thinking you have friends outside this house." She lowered her eyes, hiding her faint smile. "I was just gathering the apples." Her voice was timid. "It was a mistake," he snapped. "Do not let it happen again." She nodded, shrinking under their gaze. The warmth the cowboy left behind faded like morning fog. Rumors began almost immediately. Women in the market whispered, "She's trying to trap that cowboy." Men snickered when he passed, casting her a side glance. She felt their judgment like a weight, pressing her shoulders forward. But deep inside, the small flicker of self-worth remained, fragile but alive. She kept thinking of his calm eyes, the quiet gesture that had reminded her of dignity. Back at the house, she swept the steps again, careful not to spill a single speck of dirt. "Hurry," her sister-in-law snapped from the doorway. "The cook wants to leave soon, and you're supposed to help." "Yes," she whispered. Each movement was measured, precise. Her heart beat fast, yet she felt that small ember of pride in her chest. The simple act of completing her work correctly now carried a quiet satisfaction. When the tray of bread and butter was ready, she carried it into the dining room. The guests murmured among themselves. "She looks like she's smiling at him," one woman said, her voice sharp. "She dares to hope?" Her brother-in-law leaned close. "Do not encourage her foolishness." She held the tray, trembling slightly, but refused to meet their eyes. Instead, she focused on placing each plate carefully. That evening, the wind rattled through the shutters. She sat on the back steps, head down, brushing dirt from her hands. The day had been long, filled with whispers and judgment. She thought again of the cowboy, the quiet way he had knelt to help her. Her heart lifted slightly, despite the shame hovering nearby. She pressed her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the small comfort it offered. Her sister-in-law's voice carried through the open doorway. "You had better prove useful, or there's the door." She did not respond, only nodded and lowered her gaze. The warning felt like a shadow stretching across the porch. Yet inside her, a stubborn spark refused to die. The flicker the cowboy left behind reminded her she could survive, even if others would not see her value. Dust swirled around her boots. The last light of day caught on the barn's roof, glinting off rusted metal. The air smelled of hay and horses, of smoke from the cooking fire. She inhaled slowly, letting the scent steady her. She whispered to the evening, "I will endure." Her shawl rested against her chest, the fabric soft against her trembling hands. She imagined the cowboy riding by, calm as ever, and something unspoken passed between them, a quiet understanding. Inside, voices bickered and scolded. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of hooves. She lifted her eyes, staring down the dusty road, wondering if the quiet kindness might return, if hope could survive in Dust Creek. She pressed her hands together over the shawl, as if holding on to the ember he had left behind. "I will not let them take it from me," she whispered. The wind answered, rattling boards and bending grass, carrying the quiet promise of the morning yet to come. She walked toward the ranch under the early morning sun, hands clutching her shawl. Dust rose beneath her boots. The gate creaked as she pushed it open, expecting scolding or laughter. Instead, she found open sky, wide fields, and a quiet stretch of land. Horses nickered softly in the stalls, and the scent of hay drifted in the breeze. "Morning," the cowboy said, stepping from the barn. His hat shaded his face, but his eyes met hers steadily. "You're here." "Yes," she whispered, voice tight. Her stomach twisted with nerves. "Name on the chores list," he said, handing her a small note. "Start with the barn, then the kitchen." She nodded and stepped forward. The barn smelled of leather and straw. She brushed dust from the stalls. Workers glanced at her, nodded politely, then returned to their tasks. No laughter. No judgment. "Polish the saddles," the cowboy instructed. "They won't shine themselves." She bent over the leather, rubbing each strap carefully. "Like this?" she asked, unsure. Good, he said. His tone was calm. Steady hands. Just like that. Her fingers burned. Blisters rose on her palms, but she worked through them. The sunlight filtered through the rafters, dust dancing in golden streams. Her heart lifted with each careful motion. She straightened, proud of small progress. Lanterns next, he said. Fill them with oil. Make sure they'll burn all night. She carried the lanterns outside, setting them on posts along the fence. A soft wind played with her hair. For the first time in Dust Creek, she felt as if the day belonged to her, even in the smallest way. During midday, he motioned toward the long wooden table. Eat with the hands. Sit. You earned it. Her hands trembled. I may not. Sit, he repeated, firmly but kindly. She lowered herself onto a bench. The ranch hands regarded her with quiet curiosity. Name's Tom, one said, offering her bread. You work hard. Nice to see it done right. Thank you, she whispered, blinking. They nodded. Conversation flowed slowly. She spoke in careful sentences, telling them of small victories, polishing tack, cleaning stalls. They listened, not judging, simply responding with nods and occasional questions. Lily's out in the corral, the cowboy said after lunch. She'll need brushing. Get to it. She approached the mare cautiously. The horse lifted her head, ears twitching. She held out a hand. Lily nuzzled her palm. Her breath caught. Oh, she whispered, brushing the soft mane. The horse leaned closer, warmth spreading through her fingers. Tears pricked her eyes. The simple affection, unearned but freely given, made her chest ache with unexpected joy. You did good, the cowboy said from a gate. She likes you. I think I like her, she admitted softly. Keep at it, he said. Horses know when someone's honest. She returned to her tasks with renewed energy. Saddles shone, stalls were swept clean, and lanterns stood ready. Her hands bled slightly, but she hardly noticed. She felt strength, not only in her arms, but rising slowly inside her. For the first time in weeks, she stood a little straighter. The day stretched into evening. She carried water to the horses, brushing Lily one last time. The mare nuzzled her cheek. Good girl, she whispered, voice catching. She pressed her fingers to the mane, smelling hay and warm hair. It was simple, it was quiet, and it was hers for the moment. The cowboy approached, hands on his hips. Dinner's ready, he said. She followed, still brushing the mare gently. The long table awaited. Lanterns glowed, casting soft light over the wooden planks. The ranch hand smiled at her as she took a seat, not a servant, not a guest, but part of the small rhythm of the place. Careful with that plate, Tom said, chuckling. It looks heavy, but you're strong enough. I am, she whispered, a hint of pride threading her words. The cowboy passed quietly behind her, placing a small mug of water before her. Drink slowly, he said. She nodded, meeting his steady eyes. Thank you. After supper, she walked to the corral. Moonlight painted the barn in silver. A soft breeze rustled the hay bales. She leaned against the fence, brushing dirt from her hands. For a moment, the judgment of Dust Creek felt far away. The wind whispered through the grass, and she breathed it in, feeling the quiet strength in the openness around her. Suddenly, she caught movement along the road. Town ladies passed in a carriage, whispering. Look at her, one said. She has no right here. She doesn't belong, another replied sharply. Her stomach tightened, shame flickering like a shadow. She dropped her gaze to the dust beneath her boots, gripping the shawl around her shoulders. Yet, beneath the sting, a stubborn ember glowed. She had spent the day polishing saddles, brushing horses, and earning small victories. Their whispers could not erase what she had done. The cowboy walked beside her quietly. Don't let them steal what you've earned, he said softly. Ranch hands and horses care more than some town gossip ever will. She blinked, absorbing the warmth in his words. I will try, she said. The mare nickered beside her, nudging her hand. She smiled faintly. The wind lifted her hair, and the fence posts cast long shadows across the ground. Inside the barn, lanterns swayed with a gentle light. The sound of the horse munching hay filled the space. She pressed her shawl tighter, brushing hair from her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of belonging. Dust Creek could whisper and laugh, but here, under the wide sky and among the quiet horses, she was seen. The cowboy tipped his hat and returned to the house. She lingered a moment, brushing Lily's mane. "Good girl," she whispered again. The mare leaned against her shoulder, warm and steady. She stood tall, feeling the dust and wind around her. The ember inside her glowed a little brighter. Outside, the town women's whispers faded down the road. Inside, lanterns glowed over polished saddles and filled troughs. She drew a slow breath, letting the day's work sink into her bones. The cowboy's quiet guidance, the kindness of the hands that nodded at her, and the warmth of Lily's nuzzle combined into something new. Hope. She whispered to the night, soft and certain. "I can do this." The ranch stretched around her, open and welcoming. For the first time, she felt she had a place, however small, that was hers. Word traveled fast through Dust Creek. At the saloon, men chuckled over whiskey. "She's living with him, they say," one said, tipping his hat. Another laughed, slapping the table. "Brave or foolish, I can't tell which." From behind the bartender shook his head. "Best mind your own business," he muttered. But the whispers carried, weaving through the dry streets. Women at the market whispered sharper words. "Shameless," one hissed. "Daring," another added, eyes flicking toward the road. Her cheeks burned even when she was not there. Her in-laws grew colder by the day. "You've been gone too long," her sister-in-law snapped. "Bring us the wages you've earned. Do not waste time dawdling." Her brother-in-law leaned in, voice hard. "This is not charity. You're being paid for work, not for showing up." She nodded, silent, stomach twisting. The weight of duty pressed her shoulders down, while shame clawed at her chest. The cowboy noticed the change. He found her one evening sitting alone by the corral, lantern light flickering across the dirt. Horses nickered softly. He carried 2 tin mugs and a small coffee pot. Without a word, he set the mugs beside her. She glanced up. "Thank you," she whispered. He sat beside her on the fence rail. Neither spoke at first. The wind moved through the corral, carrying the smell of hay and horse sweat. Her fingers wrapped around the warm tin. "They're talking about me again," she admitted finally. Her voice trembled. "Everywhere I go, they whisper. Even here." She lifted her shawl higher, as if to shield herself from the wind and the world. The cowboy nodded. "I hear it." Her eyes fell to the firelight dancing in the dirt. "I'm tired," she said. "Tired of being hated. Tired of feeling like I'm nothing." He shifted slightly, voice quiet. "Dust Creek needs someone brave enough to show them what real decency looks like." She flinched at the words, surprised by the gentleness, the certainty. Do you mean me?" He met her eyes steadily. "Yes. You've worked, you've learned, and you've shown respect to those who deserve it. That counts for more than their judgment." Her breath caught. For the first time, she felt as if someone truly believed she mattered. A warmth rose in her chest, mingling with the embers of the corral fire. She pressed her fingers against the mug, letting the warmth spread. "You don't have to answer them," he added, "nor prove yourself for anyone who can't see it. I just want them to stop hating me," she whispered, voice low. He tilted his head. "Some will always judge. You can't control that. But you can control how you stand and how you treat yourself." She stared into the flickering flames. Her lips trembled. "I've never been treated like this," she admitted softly. "Even at home, even with strangers, this is worse." He nodded without judgment. "I know." Then he paused. "But you're here. You've found a place where hands and hearts respect you. That matters. That's more than enough for tonight." Her shoulders eased slightly. She lifted her gaze to him. Do you think I can ever feel that anywhere else?" He offered a faint, understanding smile. "It starts here." It grows. Dust Creek can't take that away from you unless you let it. The fire crackled between them. Silence wrapped around the corral, soft and heavy, but not uncomfortable. She sipped the coffee, bitter but warm, letting the taste anchor her. I wish it were always this simple, she murmured. It never is, he said, voice gentle. But simple moments are worth holding on to. And you've held on to more than most would. She looked down at the fire, thinking of the long days of chores, the kindness of the ranch hands, the quiet way he had guided her without expectation. Each small act stacked together, a fragile fortress against the world's scorn. Do they even know what it's like? She asked softly. To wake every day, feeling like nothing you do is enough? They might never know, he said. That's their failing, not yours. The horses shifted in the corral, nibbling hay, a calm accompaniment to the words between them. She felt a slight lift in her chest, a tentative pride growing in the quiet night. You're not alone, he said after a pause. Not here, not while I'm around. And not while the ranch hands keep their eyes open. We see you. That matters more than their whispers. Her fingers tightened around the mug. It does, she said softly. It really does. The cowboy did not speak again. He sat beside her, letting her thoughts fill the space. The firelight flickered on their boots, the corral fence, the soft shapes of hay bales. For a long moment, nothing moved except the horses and the wind, and she felt a peace she had not known in weeks. When she finally looked up at him, he tipped his hat slightly, offering a quiet reassurance. She smiled faintly, the warmth of it seeping into her chest. The embers of self-worth, small and tender, had survived the rumors and the cruelty. She pressed her shawl closer, as if holding onto that ember. From the distant town, faint sounds of Dust Creek carried through the wind, voices raised in laughter, men joking loudly, women whispering sharp words. She did not flinch. The fire, the horses, the quiet presence beside her. These were real, steady, and hers in that moment. The night stretched on, lanterns swinging in the barn and corral. She sipped her coffee, drawing in deep breaths of cool air, smelling hay, dust, and smoke. Her hands no longer shook, at least not with fear. The ember inside her glowed stronger than before. Tomorrow, he said softly, they'll try again. But tonight you rest. And remember, you're seen. You're valued. That's enough to face whatever comes. She nodded, feeling the truth in his words. For the first time in Dust Creek, she believed it. As the fire crackled and the night wind whispered through the fence posts, she pressed the shawl tighter, letting the quiet friendship, the small trust, and the warmth of the cowboy's presence settle into her. Rumors could swirl like dust storms, but here, beside the fire, she was not alone. And for the first time, she felt ready to meet tomorrow. The afternoon sun burned low, casting long shadows across the dusty streets as she followed her in-laws to the grand house. Her hands trembled, clutching the folds of her plain dress. She could feel their eyes pressing into her back. You'll serve the guests carefully this time, her sister-in-law snapped. Do not spill anything. Do not disgrace the house again. Yes, she whispered, voice soft, almost swallowed by the wind outside. Her chest tightened with old fear. Inside, the parlor glittered with silver trays and fine china. Lanterns glowed, throwing golden light across stiff smiles and powdered faces. Men and women murmured, settling into chairs and couches. She stepped forward, holding a tray of teacups, the familiar weight heavy in her hands. Careful now, a guest said, voice sharp with amusement. We wouldn't want another disaster. Her fingers shook slightly. She set one cup, then another. A man reached out, intentionally jostling her arm. Tea splashed across the white tablecloth. Clumsy, someone laughed. She's just as useless as before. Her stomach lurched. She froze, staring at the spilled tea. The memory of the first party, the first humiliation, rose like smoke in her mind. She pressed the tray tighter, shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice cracking. Laughter erupted. Glass clinked, forks rattled against plates. She tried to steady herself, but her hands would not obey. Heat rose to her cheeks. Her legs moved without control, carrying her toward the door. I can't, she whispered to herself. She stumbled through the doorway, into the cool evening. Dust rose around her boots, her breath ragged. The sky above stretched wide, empty and indifferent. She sank to the porch steps, hiding her face in her shawl. Tears burned, sliding down her cheeks, falling into the dust. A soft shadow fell over her. She looked up. The cowboy stood there, eyes calm, steady as always. In his hands was a clean handkerchief. He knelt beside her without a word, placing it gently into her trembling hands. "You don't have to serve anyone like that," he said, voice low, firm but kind. She looked into his eyes, searching, desperate. They held no judgment, only strength. Something inside her shifted, rising from the ashes of shame. She blinked back tears. I can't," she whispered. "You can," he said softly. "But not like that. You can stand, and they can see you differently this time." Her breath caught. Slowly, she pressed the handkerchief to her cheeks, straightened her shoulders, and lifted her chin. The embers of courage, nurtured on the ranch, flickered to life. He rose beside her, silent, and together they walked back through the door. The murmur of voices inside faltered. Eyes turned toward them. The in-laws froze, mouths opening then closing. The room fell into a hush. Guests shifted, unsure, their laughter dying in the air. She held the tray, steadier now, guided not by fear, but by the quiet strength in his presence beside her. "Is she?" a woman whispered, voice tight. "She looks different," someone muttered. Her sister-in-law's eyes narrowed, disbelief and fury mingling. "What were you doing?" she demanded, voice rising. She met the gaze, steady, carrying no shame. "I'm serving as I choose," she said quietly. Her voice was soft, but each word cut through the room like the cold wind outside. The cowboy placed a reassuring hand near hers, not touching, merely steadying by proximity. She felt the strength radiate from him, silent and sure. She poured the tea with care, moving like water over stone, steady and deliberate. No cup spilled. The tray stayed balanced. Guests leaned forward, startled. The whispered jokes faltered, muttered insults dwindled into silence. Some watched, some blinked, uncertain how to react. The power of quiet dignity filled the room, heavier than any laughter. "You've changed," one man muttered under his breath. He had known her only as timid, clumsy, unworthy. Now she moved like someone who mattered. She placed the tray down at the hostess's table. Hands no longer shook. Breath steadied. She took a step back, and for the first time, she noticed the soft glow of the lanterns, the polished floors, the dust motes dancing in shafts of light, and the disbelief around her. Her in-laws gaped. Her sister-in-law's lips twitched, a mixture of anger and confusion. "This cannot be," she said, voice sharp. The brother-in-law's fists tightened. "She is nothing," he growled. But the room's hush made the words seem hollow. The cowboy's eyes scanned the room, calm, silent, the kind of calm that made people reconsider their cruelty. She pressed her hands against her shawl, standing taller than before. Her heart pounded, but not from fear. Each beat was a quiet drum of defiance, of dignity reclaimed. A small voice piped up from the corner. "She serves better than anyone I've seen," whispered one of the young ranch hands who had arrived earlier, now in town for errands. Heads turned, and a ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. She did not smile. Not yet. She only met eyes steadily, waiting, poised, the quiet fire in her chest stronger than the gossip, the laughter, the cruelty. The sound of hooves struck the cobblestones outside. A knock echoed through the room. She flinched, tense. The door opened, and a man stepped inside, papers in hand. Everyone froze. A hush fell heavier than the dust outside, stilling the whispers, the judgment, the laughter. She pressed her hands to her sides, shawl folded neatly. Her heart beat steadily, caught between fear and anticipation. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice formal, carrying authority that even the in-laws could not ignore. "I have documents to present regarding ownership and estate matters." She held her breath, feeling the room shift like the wind before a storm. The embers inside her, kindled by quiet courage, glowed steady. Her shoulders straightened. The cowboy's presence beside her was solid and unwavering. She would face this moment with the dignity she had found. The crowd leaned forward, eyes wide, jaws tight. The first act of shame had become the first act of courage. And the quiet hush in the room told her something new. The story of humiliation might be ending, but the story of her worth was just beginning. Outside, the sky darkened to purple and gold, dust motes glinting in the last light. Inside, the room waited, holding its breath for what was to come. The lawyer straightened his papers, clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice crisp and formal, carrying across the polished floor. "I have documents regarding the estate of Mrs. Holloway, late of this county." She stood rigid, hands clutching her shawl. The crowd murmured, leaning forward in curiosity. The in-laws stiffened, exchanging uneasy glances. "What is this?" her sister-in-law demanded sharply. "We've managed her affairs for years." The lawyer held up a sealed envelope. "It appears there has been a misrepresentation. The late Mrs. Holloway left property, accounts, and rights to a company. All documents name her daughter as the lawful owner." Gasps rippled through the room. Forks clattered against plates. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Eyes that had mocked her now widened in disbelief. Some men leaned back, unsure how to react. Women murmured, whispers carrying a mixture of shock and awe. Her brother-in-law's face flushed crimson. "This is impossible," he barked. "We managed everything. Those papers, there must be a mistake." The lawyer shook his head, opening the envelope with deliberate care. "I will now read the sealed will." He unfolded the document, voice steady. "I, Mrs. Holloway, declare that all property, shares, and interests in the Holloway Company are to be transferred fully and irrevocably to my daughter, Catherine. Any representation to the contrary is void. This document is to be executed immediately upon my passing." She felt the words hit her chest like a hammer. Her knees threatened to buckle. The room spun around her, faces she had feared, faces that had sneered, faces that had ignored her. All now stared in stunned silence. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke, low at first. I was treated as though I had no worth, that I was less than human, that my voice did not matter." She took a shaky breath, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "I was mocked, ignored, and humiliated because no one thought I deserved respect." A hush filled the hall. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. The laughter, the whispers, the pointed fingers, all vanished under the weight of her words. Her chin lifted, and though her hands shook, her voice grew steadier. Her sister-in-law's lips pressed thin. We did what was best for the family," she stammered, but the words sounded weak, hollow. "You did what was best for yourselves," she said, voice rising slightly, carrying through the room. "You thought I had no power, no mind, no rights. You were wrong." The cowboy remained close, silent, a steady presence. His eyes scanned the crowd, ensuring no one dared interrupt. His calm steadied her. She pressed her shawl tighter, finding courage in the quiet support beside her. The lawyer looked up from the will. "By law, the company, property, and all associated rights belong to Miss Holloway. This includes all holdings previously managed by her in-laws." He paused, letting the gravity settle in the room. "She is the sole owner." Voices rose in murmured astonishment. "She owns it," someone whispered, wide-eyed. Another man muttered, "I never thought," trailing off, words abandoned. Her in-laws' faces twisted, fury and fear mingling. Her brother-in-law stepped forward, voice trembling. This cannot be. We demand." "Silence," the lawyer said firmly. "The will is final." She felt her knees weaken, but she did not sit. The room waited, breathless. Her voice returned, quivering but steady. I forgive that some of you did not see my worth. I will not forget how I was treated. But I will also not let cruelty define me. The in-laws' faces turned pale. Her sister-in-law's hands trembled. Her father-in-law's jaw tightened, unable to speak. A young ranch hand who had accompanied her earlier in town whispered to the others, "She's braver than anyone I've ever seen." The crowd seemed to hold its collective breath. The cowboy shifted slightly, a silent nod of encouragement. She drew in a deep breath. "I've been offered a seat," she continued, voice rising with quiet authority. "Not as a servant, not as a guest, but as the owner. And I will take it because I am no longer the woman you once ignored. I am the woman my mother believed I could be." Her hands shook, but the words carried. She pressed the shawl around her shoulders, letting the weight of years of humiliation lift with each syllable. The room's silence was almost sacred, broken only by the faint creak of the floorboards and the flutter of her dress. The lawyer folded the will and nodded toward her. "Legally, the decision rests with you, Miss Holloway. All actions of management, employment, and ownership are under your discretion." She glanced at the in-laws. Her sister-in-law's eyes brimmed with fear, her brother-in-law's hands clenched. They seemed smaller than before, diminished by truth and their own arrogance. You can't," her father-in-law began, voice shaking, but she raised a hand, stopping him. "I can," she said softly, yet firmly, "because I am the rightful owner, and your actions no longer hold sway over me." Her in-laws fell to their knees, the floorboards groaning beneath their weight. "Please have mercy," her sister-in-law pleaded. "We did not know." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She looked around the room, at faces that had sneered, laughed, or doubted her. She felt the tremor of bravery shake through her limbs. The cowboy stood by her side, silent, unwavering, a shield against any further cruelty. The room held still. Even the horses outside seemed quiet beneath the corral roof. Dust motes floated in slanting lantern light, and the polished floors reflected a single truth: the power belonged to her now. She swallowed. "Mercy," she said slowly, deliberately, "is not the same as weakness. You will be held accountable for the choices you've made. But I will not seek vengeance. I will act with fairness, as my mother would have wanted." A collective shiver moved through the room. Her in-laws pressed their foreheads to the floor, murmuring apologies that no longer held power. The guests, still hushed, began to murmur softly to one another, their eyes now filled with recognition. The woman who had been invisible, mocked, and humiliated stood tall and acknowledged. She had reclaimed not only property and rights, but dignity. The cowboy shifted slightly, nodding toward the empty seat at the head of the table. She walked forward slowly, each step firm, every footfall a quiet declaration of worth. The murmurs rose and fell like wind across the prairie, tentative and respectful. She placed her hands on the polished wood, looking out at the crowd. She did not smile, but her eyes shone with a hard-earned calm. "This seat," she said, "is mine, not because I demanded it, but because it was mine all along." The lawyer inclined his head, setting the papers aside. The in-laws remained on their knees, broken, humbled, and awaiting the consequences of their past actions. The room felt lighter, as if the air itself had shifted. Dust Creek had seen its first measure of quiet justice, and it had come not with anger, but with courage, calm, and a slow-burning strength. She sank into the chair, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, heart still pounding but steady. The cowboy stood beside her, eyes alert, silent, guarding the space she now claimed. For the first time, she felt fully seen. And for the first time, she believed that the world could no longer define her by cruelty. Word. The morning sun filtered through the shutters, casting long, warm streaks across the polished floor. She stood at the threshold of the parlor, her mother's shawl draped carefully over her arm. Her in-laws hovered, faces tight with lingering resentment. "I will not return to this house," she said, voice steady. Your cruelty has taught me nothing but the cost of fear and false loyalty. I will rebuild my life with honest people, not those who mock what they cannot understand." Her sister-in-law opened her mouth, then shut it, as if words had abandoned her. Her brother-in-law's fists clenched. "You can't just—" "I can," she interrupted, tone gentle but firm. "I can and I will. Your doors are closed to me." She pressed the shawl to her chest, a small act of reclaiming herself. Her father-in-law's face flushed. "So, you leave everything we provided?" "I leave behind only the cruelty and the lies," she said. "The rest I claim for myself." With dignity intact. They fell silent, unable to argue further. She turned, stepping lightly across the threshold, leaving their anger behind like dust on the floor. Outside, the wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of hay and the open prairie. The cowboy awaited near the corral, quiet as always. A crate of tools and supplies rested against his boot. "Good morning," he said simply. "I hear you've made a decision." "I have," she said. "I'm done with their house. Done with their judgment." He nodded. "Then the ranch is yours to work with, not under. I could use a careful eye on supplies, someone who understands the value of order and respect." She studied him for a moment, weighing the offer. It was not charity. It was partnership. "I accept," she said. "Not as a handout, but as someone who will contribute. Equally." He tipped his hat. "Then welcome aboard, Miss Holloway. We'll start slow." Days passed like gentle river water, smoothing rough stones. The town, slow to adjust, began to see her differently. She walked the main street carrying baskets of fresh bread and pies, warm from the oven. Children ran to her side, eyes bright, giggling as they received cookies she offered freely. "Miss Holloway," a woman called from across the street, "could you advise me on my garden? I've been struggling with the new soil." She nodded, smiling softly. "Of course. Let's walk and I'll show you what worked for me." The whispers of gossip waned, replaced by quiet acknowledgement. Hands tipped hats, merchants offered greetings. The same streets that had judged her now acknowledged her presence with respect. Her cabin at the edge of the ranch became her sanctuary. Inside, the mother's shawl hung above the hearth, a reminder of love that endured beyond cruelty. She polished the lanterns each evening, letting their glow illuminate the small room. Every crack in the boards, every dust mote that shimmered in the light felt like a witness to her reclaimed dignity. One evening, as the sky burned orange and purple, the cowboy approached, leading Lily the mare from the corral. The animal's coat gleamed in the fading light, mane brushing against her hands as she combed it patiently. "You've shown courage to everyone here," he said, voice soft. "Even yourself." Her fingers stilled over the brush. I feel it," she admitted, the warmth of affirmation lifting her chest. "A courage I never believed I could have." He nodded, eyes scanning the horizon. "You've earned their respect, but more importantly, you've earned your own." She glanced at the barn, the corral, the open field stretching under the sunset. Dust swirled at their feet, tiny particles catching firelight. "It's peaceful," she murmured. "I never knew it could feel like this." "Peace is earned," he said. "It's not given by chance, nor by avoidance of struggle. You claimed it with steady hands and patience." She leaned back slightly, letting the mare nuzzle her shoulder. Lily's warmth reminded her of the simple kindnesses that had built her confidence, the small nods of ranch hands, the quiet steadiness of the cowboy, the freedom of labor that respected her. Children's laughter drifted faintly from the edge of the property, carrying on the evening breeze. They chased a rolling hoop across the dusty yard, tumbling into one another with shouts of delight. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, noticing that she no longer flinched at the noise of life around her. She belonged to this world now, not as an outcast, but as someone present, visible, valued. I think I'm finally safe," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "You are," the cowboy replied, voice steady. "And no one here can take that from you. Not the town, not your past, not even them." He nodded toward the distant horizon, where the sun had nearly disappeared, leaving streaks of gold and violet across the sky. She lifted her chin, letting the breeze touch her cheeks. Lanterns in the cabin glowed softly, illuminating the shawl and the polished surfaces, casting her shadow long across the floor. For the first time, she felt fully in her own skin. No laughter, no whispers, no cruelty could reach her there. "You've come far," he added, brushing a hand over the mare's mane. "Farther than most would dare. And you've done it without letting bitterness rule you." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "It's taken time," she admitted. "But I see now that kindness, steady work, and honesty, they are worth more than vengeance." "Always," he said. "And you've earned it all." She turned toward the cabin door, lantern in hand, the shawl wrapped around her shoulders like a protective shield. Each step across the dusty porch felt deliberate, sure. The wind carried scents of hay, horses, and the earth itself. She inhaled deeply, the cool air filling her chest, steadying her heart. Children waved from the yard, voices carrying across the open fields. Women nodded as she passed by, seeking her advice, their previous scorn replaced by curiosity and respect. Merchants greeted her with nods. Even the townspeople she had feared seemed to notice her presence, quietly, without derision. She stepped fully outside, the lantern casting a warm glow across her face. Her eyes took in the horizon, the ranch, the cabin, the open sky that stretched wide above her. Dust swirled at her boots, golden in the fading light. The wind carried away the last echoes of past cruelty. The cowboy stood nearby, calm as ever, watching without a word. Lily shifted her weight, nuzzling her hand once more. She pressed her palm against the mare's muzzle, closing her eyes. For the first time, she felt wholly visible, wholly safe, wholly herself. She breathed in the evening air, letting the warmth of lantern light, the soft laughter of children, the open land, and the steadfast presence of the cowboy settle into her bones. This was the life she would build. Honest, calm, unshaken. A life where kindness and dignity mattered more than cruelty and judgment. And for the first time in Dust Creek, she smiled freely, knowing she belonged. The sky darkened to indigo, lantern light glowed warmly on her face, and the prairie stretched endlessly before her, patient and welcoming. She was no longer invisible,